1 year later. Liam grinned as he felt his weightless body drifting through space. He was surrounded entirely by blackness, punctuated only by thousands of infinitely small points of light. He could see more of them now than he could have ever hoped to see back on Earth. Waving his hands about, he could actually begin to feel himself propelling through space, almost as though he were swimming through water. Sure enough, the stars in front of him slowly drifted closer at different rates of speed, creating a dazzling spectacle as he slowly drifted his way through the stars. For nearly an hour, Liam moved through the cosmos, only faintly aware of a deep acoustic humming in the background which calmed his mind as he journeyed from one incredible sight to another. Before long, however, the hum faded away, and the stars drifted from view until he was surrounded entirely in darkness. He felt his weight slowly returning to his body as he became conscious that he was laying on his back. A moment later, he felt a slight tugging sensation on his head as the BD wreath was pulled off, flooding his eyes with a gentle light. He was back in the doctor lady's office, which he got to visit each week. In a chair across from him sat his mother, her usual smile on her face beaming back at him. Leaning his head back, he could see the doctor lady above him. From his perspective, she was upside down, but Liam could still recognize the smile on her face as she looked down at him. "So how was that, Liam?" Judy asked. Liam jumped up in the seat and spun around. It was Nova! Before Judy could respond, Liam spun back to face his mother. "Mom, I was swimming in space, and there were hundreds of stars, and I was swimming in them. Hundreds of stars I was swimming in, like whoosh." "Wow, that sounds incredible." Liam's mother stood as she spoke, her eyes looking back at him expectantly. "And what do you need to say?" Liam stared back with a blank expression for a moment before his eyes filled with understanding. He turned back around. "Thank you, Dr. Albaves." Judy laughed as she rustled his hair. "Don't mention it, Liam. Tell you what, I got a game you can play out at the receptionist's office right through that door. You just tell Mrs. Sung I said you could play it since you're my best choom while I talk to your mom for a minute, all right?" Liam's eyes widened as a huge smile spread across his face. "Mom, did you hear that? Dr. Albaves said I could play a game." Before waiting for a response from his mother, Liam bolted across the room and through the door to the receptionist's office. The moment he was out of earshot, his mother let out a sigh as she rubbed her eyes. Good Lord. I don't know where he gets all that energy from. It's exhausting just watching him. Yeah, he's definitely a handful. Autism and ADHD are a solid 1-2 punch. Judy smiled as she set the wreath down on her desk and sat in her office chair, pulling up her tablet with Liam's files. But if you take a look at his progress since he started last month, he's actually making good headway in every department. Sensory perception, hyperactivity, speech, all showing Nova improvement. If he keeps up at his current pace, in a few months you'll barely notice the underlying conditions." Liam's mother shook her head in amazement. "That's incredible. You have no idea how thrilled I am to hear you say that. It's such a relief to know that he's going to have options when he grows up. Maybe one day he could even land a job at Arasaka." Judy's smile faltered slightly, though she maintained her composure. "Of course. What's important is that he'll have all the potential in the world to be what he wants to be. Thank you again for everything, Miss Alvarez. I'm so glad his pediatrician referred us to you. Honestly, I didn't think this would do a thing for him." "I get it. BD therapy's still a new field. Lots of untapped potential to help kids just like Liam." Standing from her seat, Liam's mother extended her hand, which Judy took. "And here I thought all that it was good for was porn." Judy shook her hand, suppressing the chuckle which had nearly escaped her throat. "Thanks again. We'll see you next week, same time?" "Absolutely. Just check with Mrs. Sung to confirm, and tell Liam I've got something really preem cooking up for him next time." Liam's mother returned and walked out of her office towards her son, who was now wearing a headset and bouncing around the room as he pretended to blast invisible enemies. Closing the door, Judy walked back to her desk and sat down, putting Liam's files back into her organizer. From behind the door, she could hear Liam protesting as his mother told him it was time to leave. She could faintly overhear Liam's voice just before they left. "Mom, when can I color my hair?" Biting her lip in amusement, Judy took her hollow from her pocket and grazed her fingers across its surface. A moment later, the screen turned into a mirror. Glancing at her reflection, she ran her hands through her hair. A few months earlier, she had made the decision to cut it short again, shorter than she had in years. Though the tips still retained a hint of pink, she had chosen not to dye it since then, and to allow her natural brown to grow out. Otherwise, she couldn't make out any signs that the passage of time over the last year had left any visible lines or marks on her skin. Judy changed the surface back to the normal display and was about to slide her hollow back into her pocket when her eyes caught sight of her message folder. There were 17 notifications. With a sigh, she opened the folder and began to scroll through them. Most appeared to be clients attempting to schedule their next therapy sessions, with a pair of messages from prior clients offering her their heartfelt thanks. Glancing up at the office door, she made a mental note to make sure she talked to her new secretary about not giving out her personal number any longer. Browsing further, one message stood out. Abuelas. Opening the message, she smiled as she read through it.
Hola, Judy. Good to see you last month and enjoy a few drinks together. Give us a call when you can. Your abuela wants help with the stove. She wants to see you again. Te amo.
Judy closed the message, making a note on her calendar to remind herself to call them tomorrow and to clear a weekend on her schedule as soon as she could. She had made it a point to visit them as often as she could since coming to Portland, and had likely seen them more over the last year than at any point since she had last lived with them. Her abuelas had been, as expected, as compassionate and as loving as they had always been when she had arrived at their home. Judy had stayed with them for nearly 3 weeks, allowing herself the time she needed to find herself once more and to consider what she would do next. When they had seen her for the first time wearing her abuela's necklace, they had smiled but not said anything, content with silence in their long-fought victory over Judy's stubbornness. While those few weeks had been an opportunistic time for her to think, they had also been tumultuous for her as well. There had been times when she and her abuela would sit out on the porch late at night, laughing as they drank together, and Judy would truly lose herself in happiness during those moments. But there were also times throughout each day, particularly when she awoke or before she went to sleep, when she would find herself overwhelmed with grief and cry as she struggled to move forward. Finally, after nearly 3 weeks had passed, she had made her decision. She had felt an urge to dive back into editing once more, if for no other reason than to have an outlet for her feelings, and the prospect of a fresh beginning in a new place which would be all hers had been too appealing to pass up. Having packed her things once more, she had nervously set out for Portland. When Judy had arrived, she had been surprised just how close to the river the studio was located. Centered right in the heart of a vibrant and active city center, Judy noted it wasn't far from the spot where her and V once sat upon the riverbank, though she had made it a point not to venture back there. The entire lower floor of the studio had consisted of a reception lounge, a large editing bay in the back which she had converted into a working office, and a gracious server room. An unexpected surprise, however, had been the upper floor. V had said nothing about the studio at the time, and Judy had not wanted to ask about it. When she had climbed the stairs and opened the door, she was greeted with a large living area with an adjoining kitchen. The floors were all hardwood, and an entire wall of the living room was made up of glass windows, offering an incredible view of the river and street below her. Down a short hallway was a modest bedroom and small bathroom. Judy couldn't help but feel a mix of frustration and gratitude as she had taken in the sight and begun the process of furnishing both the office and her new living space, The eddies V had left her had been more than enough to provide for the best editing equipment she could get her hands on, and even to take on an extra hand to help with the administrative work which she quickly found herself struggling with. Within a few short weeks, and without a clear understanding of what she was doing, she had opened her doors for business. At first, things had been slow and disappointing. The few clients who entered were mostly curious bystanders, and a few had inquired about the possibility of illicit BDs, which Judy had promptly refused. After nearly a month with little to show for it, an idea came to mind, and she had paid a visit to Dr. Klein. He had been incredibly gracious and accommodating, faintly remembering her from their visit a year earlier, and had referred several contacts from the university and medical field to her so she could try to build a client list. Within a few months, Judy had built a solid and expanding network of clients and was quickly finding her talents back in high demand. Now, she was being booked several weeks out as word of her BD therapies spread. A buzz from the intercom above her head snapped Judy out of her thoughts as her secretary's voice blared through. "Judy, there's a Mrs. Borden here to see you." Judy smiled and reached up to the intercom, making another mental note to disconnect it so her secretary would have to use her holo before pressing the speak button. "Thanks, Lily. You can send her back." A moment later, her office door opened and her newest friend, Kelly Borden, stepped inside. A woman perhaps a year or two younger than Judy, she projected confidence as she strolled into the office, her eyes casually glancing around. "Hey there, Judy. How's things?" Judy turned to look at her. Kelly was a bit taller than she was, and her long blonde hair was draped down the back of her head and reached down across her shoulders. Her pale skin was relatively blemish-free, though Judy could make out the thin lines of cyberwear which ran down her neck and under her shirt, the result of a synthetic lung replacement she had needed a few years earlier. A tattoo of a white orchid ran down the length of her right forearm to her sleeve. Judy had met her a few months earlier at a nearby bar, just a few blocks away from her studio. It had been early into the night, and she had been enjoying drinks with a few friends she had recently made. One of them, a woman named Cheryl, who doubled as a bartender when she wasn't working at her day job as an auto detailer, had introduced Kelly to the group. She was also new to the city, having completed medical school just a few months earlier. When Kelly had offered Judy her hand, she had immediately taken notice of the tattoo as she shook it. A few hours and several drinks later, and they had become fast friends. They both shared an affinity for old tech, often losing the rest of their circle of friends in their conversations, which could stretch on for hours. As a pediatrician, Kelly also shared an interest in wanting to help others, particularly children, just as Judy did. But what had caught Judy's attention more than anything was a small tattoo she had spotted on the back of Kelly's neck a few days after they had first met. A group of them had met for lunch one afternoon, and after finishing their meals, they had begun to get up from their table. When Kelly had turned to leave, Judy's breath had caught in her throat. A small cross was imprinted on her skin just behind her ear, near the back of her neck. The simple shape was nearly the same size as her necklace, which she still wore. Judy had not said anything then, though she had been curious and had wanted to inquire on its meaning. Since then, they had seen each other several times a week in the months that followed. "Hey, Kel, how are things shaking?" Kelly shrugged as she continued to glance around the room. "Not much. Just finished my shift. Thought maybe you might want to grab a bite?" Judy sighed. "Would love to, but I've got 2 more appointments scheduled for this afternoon. I gotta talk to Lily about how she's scheduling all these. How about we grab some lunch tomorrow? Maybe we could call Cheryl, see if she wants to meet up with us." Kelly paused. Judy noticed that her gaze had turned to the floor, and she was nervously biting her lip. "So, how about this evening instead? I'm happy to wait. If you're not hungry, maybe we could just grab a drink together? I mean, only if you want to, Judy. Totally fine if you want to wait for lunch tomorrow and call Cheryl. As Kelly spoke, an odd yet familiar feeling had begun to creep into Judy's chest. She became aware that her heart was fluttering in her chest as her breathing quickened. Judy, you all right? Realizing she had been holding her breath and Kelly was staring at her uncertainly, she quickly nodded. Sure, I mean, we can grab a drink later tonight. Were you thinking Silvio's? A smile spread across Kelly's face. Yeah, I think I'm in love with their steak tacos. Don't care if it's all synth, they taste fucking preem. It's a weakness. Does 5 sound good? Sure, guess I'll see you then, Kelly. Judy flinched to herself, reflecting upon how awkward her own reply had sounded. Nova, Kelly replied. Well, I don't want to keep you, so I'll let you get back to work. Whoa, where'd those come from? Judy followed Kelly's gaze towards the wall where a pair of starfish hung. Those two? Pulled them out of the ocean myself about a year back. I like having them around. Helps to keep me centered, I guess. Huh, Kelly replied as she studied them. They're beautiful. Quite a pair. Judy smiled. Yeah, they were. Another awkward silence passed between them before Kelly took in a deep breath. Anyway, I'm gonna get going. I'll see you tonight. As Kelly turned to leave, a memory of V suddenly sprung to the front of Judy's mind. The words V had spoken, fresh in her thoughts, had nearly sprung from her own lips before Judy had barely been able to restrain them.
Okay, is this a date?
Judy's mouth parted as Kelly left. Her eyes drifted back to the pair of starfish which hung on the wall. It had been a year since V had died, and the time since then had been filled with a wild blend of sadness as well as joy. There were still moments where she would find herself crying uncontrollably as her memories drifted back to the time they had spent together. But there were also moments where she had felt truly happy, almost as though she had not only discovered a new life, but that she had finally settled into a phase of her life which she could call home. Her mind wandered back to Kelly. She knew there was a connection between them, something which was more than friendship. That much had been evident even upon the first night they had met, when the bartender had needed to remind them it was closing time. They had glanced around, realizing they were the last patrons remaining, and had gotten lost in conversation between themselves. As time passed, she had found her thoughts were drifting to Kelly more often, and, like clockwork, they would then quickly turn to V. As Judy grabbed her BD wreath off the desk to begin preparing for her next client, she felt as though she had just been thrust towards a crossroads. She hadn't been sure if Kelly had felt the same way as she did, and she had been hesitant to approach the topic, but now there was no doubt in her mind that she did. Shaking her thoughts away, Judy began to tinker with the wreath and focused on the work at hand. A few hours later, her last client for the day had left. A middle-aged man who had lost his wife and daughter during a refinery accident a few months earlier. He had nearly been suicidal when he had been referred to her. Though his grief was still fresh, Judy had felt confident that she had been able to back him away from the ledge by editing a pair of recordings he had provided to her of his family into a single BD, which managed to capture not just their love, but the peacefulness they had experienced before the accident. She had needed to be careful, though, and exercise a degree of finesse as she had edited the final piece. If it came across as overly sentimental, the client would only feel his loss amplified afterwards. If it was too clinical, it might serve to push him closer to the edge once again. After shutting off her equipment, Judy ventured to the front office, Lily, her receptionist, had already finished her work for the day and had just stood from her desk. She was much older than Judy, nearly pushing 70, and her skills were in desperate need of refinement. But she was kind and, perhaps more importantly, was dedicated to helping Judy be successful. "Hey Lily, what do we have teed up for tomorrow?" Lily froze in place as her eyes widened. I'm not sure. I can double check. Let me pull up." Judy raised a hand to stop her. It's fine, Lily. Pretty sure I've got a late morning, so we can both start a bit later." Lily's expression quickly changed to relief. "That's good. Is there anything I can do for you before I head out?" "Nope. You have yourself a good night, Lily. See you tomorrow." Lily smiled as she picked up her purse and started towards the door. "Thank you, Judy. You too." Once Lily had left, Judy locked the door and headed upstairs to her flat. Venturing into the kitchen, she grabbed a can of Nicola from the fridge. After opening it and taking a long swig, she wandered over to the window. The traffic on the street below her was beginning to pick up, and more people were walking along the sidewalks as the workday ended. Judy's eyes drifted further towards the river, taking note of a small fishing boat which was slowly working its way through the current. The sun still hung high overhead, though it was approaching the hour where it would soon begin to slowly tease its way closer towards the horizon. Glancing at her hollow, Judy noted it was just past 4 and decided to clean herself up and change. Silvio's, the restaurant Kelly had suggested, had become a favorite spot of theirs. Though the food was almost all synth, it was cooked well in a traditional Latin style, and it had a great ambiance. They had found it was a place where they could start with food and, over the course of an evening, transition to drinks without feeling the urge to visit somewhere else. A short while later, Judy was finishing her makeup as she stared at herself in the mirror. She had decided to go with a green tank top tucked into a pair of white cut-off shorts. As she walked towards the stairs, she grabbed her Aldecaldo jacket off the sofa and threw it on. Though the afternoon was still warm, the wind tended to pick up in the evenings, and she had learned long ago not to underestimate the evening's chill. Marching down the stairs, Judy stepped outside and locked the door behind her. Turning around, she began to walk down the sidewalk towards Silvio's, which was only a few blocks away. A short time later, Judy found herself sitting at the bar inside Silvio's. The bar was filled with green and orange lights, and a row of windows along the side allowed the sun to shine through. It was not yet too crowded, though as the evening pressed on, there was little doubt that more patrons would soon be arriving. Judy had staked out another bar stool next to her for Kelly when she arrived. Taking a sip from her water, Judy glanced at her hollow while she waited. Pan Am had sent her a message not long after she had sat down.
"Hey Jude, you were right about those processors. Got the comms on the Basilisk cleared up in no time. Miss you. Hope you're doing okay. Call me. Past time you visited."
Smiling to herself, Judy typed her reply.
"Hey Pan. Yeah, the Militech processors are mad underpowered. Doing good. Hope you are too. About to have a drink with a friend. Date? We'll call you later. Promise to visit soon. Bye."
Judy nervously bit her lip as she sent the message. There was something about putting what she was doing into a message for someone else which made her feel uneasy. "Hey, Judy." Judy turned to see Kelly walking towards her, her breath catching in her throat. Kelly was wearing a pair of black jeans and a black tank top, which only served to highlight the blonde color of her hair. She had a wide smile on her face as she motioned to sit down next to Judy. "Hey, Kelly. Glad you made it." Judy hoped her voice didn't sound as awkward as it did in her mind. She found herself distracted by the orchid tattoo on Kelly's forearm. She realized she had never seen Kelly wear anything which revealed her upper arms and shoulders, as the tattoo worked its way along the length of her arm and across her shoulder before dipping underneath her top. Judy's heart fluttered in her chest even as she tore her eyes away and fixed them on Kelly's. Yeah, me too. Really glad, actually. You haven't been waiting long, have you? Not at all. It just got here a while ago. Judy and Kelly stared at each other in silence, both uncertain of what to say next. Taking a deep breath, Judy pressed on. So, you want a drink? Kelly smiled. After this day? Hell yeah, I do. Hey, bartender. Judy raised her eyebrows in surprise at the sudden assertiveness from Kelly. A moment later, the man behind the bar walked over to them and rested his metal arms onto the bar in front of them. Evening, ladies. What can I get you? Kelly glanced at Judy questioningly, waiting for her to go first. Judy turned to the bartender. I'll have a sense-on the rocks with a harp chaser. Girl doesn't mess around, does she? Kelly mused to the bartender. I'll have the same, please. You got it. The bartender turned and quickly began to pour their drinks. So, you're a tequila lover, I take it. Can't say I'm surprised. Judy chuckled. Actually, wasn't really big on the stuff till recently. But yeah, guess you could say I've warmed up to it. What about you? Kelly glanced up at the ceiling as she thought over her answer. Guess I'm a little more of a bourbon lover, though I'll never turn down a tequila. or much else for that matter. The bartender returned and set both glasses in front of them. Judy took hers as Kelly did the same, a strange nervousness taking hold of her. Glancing at Kelly out of the corner of her eye, she could see the same nervousness reflected on her face. So, Kelly began as she took a deep breath. Thanks for coming out with me tonight. Anything particular you want to drink to? Judy could feel her heart beginning to pound in her chest. Why was she feeling like this? How about maybe to the beginning of something nice? Judy examined Kelly's face desperately as she spoke, searching for any hint of her reaction. As she saw a small smile spread across her lips, Judy felt a wave of relief wash over her. Cheers to that. They clanked their glasses together and drank. Nearly 2 hours later, the awkwardness had passed as Judy and Kelly enjoyed their evening together. As expected, the bar had gotten busier and louder throughout the evening, and both women eventually had to resort to yelling to each other to hear one another. They had talked and laughed about a variety of topics. How Kelly liked being a pediatrician, what Judy was planning for bringing on another editor to help out, their thoughts on the recent Bushido film remake. Before long, Judy had looked out the window and realized the sun was beginning to set on the horizon. Kelly seemed to take notice of her gaze. Do you need to go? Judy's eyes widened. No, not at all. Just didn't realize how much time had passed. You know you're going to be freezing out there later without a jacket, right? You gonk? Hey, I'm plenty warm inside, which is what counts. Besides, you could just loan me yours, you know? That thing looks pretty legit, by the way. If you don't mind my asking, where'd you get it? Judy finished the last of her drink. I spent a few months with the Aldecaldos about a year back. Upon seeing the confusion on Kelly's face, Judy explained. Nomad clan, just outside of Night City where I used to live. After we left and went to Arizona, they took us in and, well, that's how I got the jacket. Us? Judy winced. Sorry, I should have clarified. Still hard to look back and separate just myself from that time. I was with someone back then, you know? Kelly nodded as she took another sip from her drink. Judy had noticed she seemed to be a slower drinker, choosing instead to sip and savor each taste. I see. Guy or... Judy smiled even as her cheeks flushed. Girl, gotcha. Kelly smiled, her own cheeks reflecting Judy's as they turned pink. Well, now I'm intrigued. Can't leave a story like that hanging in the wind. Come on, Jude, fess up. Pausing, Judy thought back to her time with V. Their story had been so rich and complex. How could she possibly tell someone everything they had experienced and felt together? Well, her name was... Judy's voice suddenly caught in her throat as she clenched her jaw and turned her face away.
God damn it, not now.
A warm hand rested on Judy's shoulder. Hey, you okay? Judy sniffed and wiped the tears which had quickly welled in her eyes. Yeah, sorry. It's really fucking hard to talk about it. Kelly nodded, her eyes filled with sympathy as she squeezed her shoulder. No, you don't need to be sorry, Judy. We can totally talk about something else. Looking back at her, Judy could see something else behind the green eyes which were staring back at her. A desire for something more, though Judy couldn't tell what. No, I want you to know. Judy took a deep breath as she steadied herself. Oh, her name was V. Met her back in Night City not too long before we both left. We fell in love. A pair of gonks completely head over heels for one another. Judy caught herself as she found her fingers drifting towards her mouth, her old compulsion surfacing once more before forcing them to remain on the bar in front of her. She was glad in that moment that Kelly wasn't a smoker either. What happened, if you don't mind my asking? Kelly asked, her voice sounding cautious as she broached the topic further. The details would take an entire night to get through, and I'd need to be a lot more drunk than this to get through it all. Guess the best way to say it is, she was sick. She died about a year ago, not too long after we met. Judy again felt her eyes beginning to sting and was about to wipe them clear once more when Kelly reached forward and embraced her. Judy hesitated before tentatively putting her arms around her and lowering her head onto her shoulder. Kelly's hair smelled of a mixture of flowers and a perfume which was intoxicating, and Judy found herself feeling calmer as she breathed in the pleasant scent. Oh, Judy, I'm so sorry. I can't even imagine. Kelly's hands gently rubbed across Judy's back, making her close her eyes at the familiar sensation. When Judy opened them, she saw a number of people at the far end of the bar casting their glances towards them. Judy pulled herself away. It's okay. Hey, do you mind if we get out of here? Lots of wandering eyes, and I can barely hear a fucking thing. Kelly nodded as she gestured to the bartender. Sure, I'll get the tab. Can't. I opened a tab when I got here. Judy's eyes briefly glowed as she paid the bill. And now we're all paid up. You didn't have to do that, Judy, Kelly protested. It was my idea to come out here tonight. Judy smiled as she stood. And it was my idea to accept. Come on, let's go for a walk, if you're game. That sounds like a Nova idea. Kelly rose from her seat, and together they walked outside. Stepping onto the sidewalk, the air had gotten noticeably cooler. The sun still hung on the horizon, casting a brilliant golden glow onto the river current. Judy zipped up her jacket as she glanced over at Kelly. No shame in admitting you're getting cold. Promise I won't say I told you so, but I did tell you so. Kelly raised an eyebrow as she stretched her arms out. Who's cold? Feels pleasantly mild to me. Giving her a smirk, Judy and Kelly ran across the street between the line of cars waiting on the traffic signal to change. Reaching the other side, they began to stroll down the path which ran along the length of the river. Other people were scattered about, some sitting on the grass, staring out at the river while others walked past them. On the far side of the river was a small marina where a handful of boats were docked, lazily rocking up and down in a gentle current. Beautiful night, don't you think? Kelly asked. Yeah, it's peaceful. Judy's eyes searched about. No one on the river tonight, though. Kelly shrugged. Yeah, I've never been out there either. Would like to one day. Take it all the way upstream to the ocean and just relax. I've never seen it before. The ocean. Judy pursed her lips as she looked at Kelly. I've actually got a boat up here. Could take us out sometime. Seriously? How did you come across a boat? I mean, I know you're doing well at the studio now, but aren't they expensive? Judy smiled as she looked back to the river. It was a gift from V. After I came up here, I had it brought up. It's actually docked, maybe just a couple miles back that way. Judy pointed behind her as they continued to walk. They remained quiet as they continued to walk. Judy could sense that there was a lot going on in Kelly's mind, questions she wanted to ask now that she had opened the door to her past. Any for your thoughts? Judy asked, giving her a gentle nudge. Kelly managed a small smile, which quickly faded from her face. I don't know. Don't worry about it. Judy stopped. What is it? It's okay, Kelly. You can talk to me. Kelly stopped and crossed her arms as she turned to face her, Judy noticing that her skin was covered with goosebumps. For a moment, her eyes hung on the horizon before they slowly found their way to Judy. Judy, you know why I asked you out tonight, right? Judy's mouth parted as she took in a sharp breath, her eyes blinking rapidly. She had assumed their night together might take a turn in this direction at some point, but she had still found herself unprepared for when it actually happened. Yeah, I mean, yes, Kelly. I know. Kelly nodded. I just don't think that I can compare to all this. You living in Night City, running with nomads, owning a boat, having lost the woman you love. Your life just seems so much more, I don't know, complex than mine? Or that's the wrong word. Fuck. Sorry, I guess I feel like a bit of a gonk right now. As she spoke, Kelly was slowly pacing back and forth before she had taken a step away, hugging herself more tightly. When she did, Judy's instinct had been to reach out to her. But something held her back.
I have to.
Judy's legs seemed frozen, unable to move forward. You don't need to apologize, Kelly. I get it. Believe me, my life's complex, all right, but not compared to yours or anyone else's for that matter. We all live our own lives, have our own little inner selves that others don't see. Same goes for you. And I want to know more about you. I do, Kelly. As Judy spoke, she could feel Kelly's eyes searching hers. Her fingers twitched at her side as she struggled to raise her arm, but still failed to do so.
It's time.
I don't know, Judy. I guess I care about you. A lot. Guess you could say I have feelings for you, and I don't know if you feel the same way about me. And if not, that's okay. I'm sorry, but I need to know. Judy stared at Kelly. Her eyes conveyed a vulnerability she hadn't seen in them before, a longing. Slowly, Judy's hand worked its way into her pocket, pulling out her hollow. Her breathing began to quicken as she looked around, her eyes spotting a bench nearby. Will you sit with me? Judy asked. Kelly nodded as they walked to the bench. Once they had sat down, Judy danced her fingers across the screen of her hollow for a few moments before she raised it for Kelly to see. Do you see this? Kelly squinted as she peered at the screen.
For only when you are ready to let me go. Take your time.
V. She left me this message after she died. I've never... Oh. I've never watched it before, but I think I need to. Judy's voice wavered as she spoke, her eyes beginning to sting. I'll give you some space, okay? I won't be far. Kelly's hand motioned towards Judy's, but stopped. Standing up, she nodded and wandered towards the shore, her eyes locked on the sun which was dipping below the horizon. Judy slowly glanced down at her hollow, her eyes locked on the words that stared up at her. Blinking away the stinging in her eyes, she focused on slowing her breathing and calming herself, though she could still feel her heart pounding in her chest. Her fingers shook as she opened the message. The screen turned black, and for a moment, Judy thought something had gone wrong before she began to hear a rustling sound from the speaker. And suddenly, there was V. Judy's efforts to calm herself just a moment earlier instantly failed as her throat constricted and her chin began to tremble. It was clearly night, and as Judy searched the image in front of her, she could faintly make out sand in the background. V was only visible from the chest up, though Judy could see she was wearing her Aldecaldo's jacket. Her bright pink hair splashed across the side of her head as she brushed them away from her face. The message had clearly been recorded months before she had died, as V appeared as vibrant and alive as she had ever been. As she shifted, Judy could see she was leaning against a motorbike. Suddenly, Judy was able to place the setting.
Our last night at the camp.
Judy recalled how Panam had dared V to drive out into the pitch black that night. V had seemed oddly detached from herself just before she had left and had been gone for longer than she should have. Her cheeks had been wet when she returned. Now, Judy understood why. V's voice cut through the silence, as clear as though she were kneeling right in front of her.
Hey, Jude, so I had an idea and you know what that means.
A devilish grin spread across her face as she held her arms out to her sides.
I want to believe that things will turn out differently, and if they do, you'll never need to see this. And then I'll just be standing out here in the middle of the desert talking to myself for no reason, which wouldn't even be the most gonk thing I've done in the last 5 minutes, but you know me, never been big on miracles, so here this goes.
V took a deep breath as she brought her hollow closer to her face.
I'm not going to say all the things I want to right now, Jude. I know that no matter what happened, no matter how things ended, that you already know how I felt about you. And I knew how you felt about me, so I'm gonna try really fucking hard not to make you cry.
Judy chuckled, even as a sob escaped her lips.
No. What I want to say to you, Judy, and I can only hope right now that you'll see this at the right time, is that I want this for you. Whatever it is you feel like you're on the verge of, don't hang on to me anymore, Jude. You gotta give up the ghost to hit you with a lyrical deep cut. I know you'll get that one.
As a tear slid down Judy's cheek, she stared back at V as a tear fell down her own.
Shit, I'm really fucking this up, aren't I?
V laughed as she wiped away the tear.
All right, let me just be direct since I'm too much of a gonk to do this subtly. There's gonna be a time, Jude, and if you're watching this, it might be right now, when you're gonna meet someone else. Another girl. And I know you, Jude. Maybe better than you know yourself. You're gonna want to do what you've always done best. You're gonna want to fight it. Compare it to what we had. It's natural for you, I guess. One of the many things I love.
V stopped herself as she sobbed. Taking a moment to compose herself, she took a deep breath and continued.
Don't fight it, Judy, please! It'll be impossible not to compare. I mean, just look at me for fuck's sake. I'm stacked. But please don't fight it, Judy. Embrace it, all of it. It won't mean that you're betraying what we had. That'll never be fucking possible. I'll always be in your heart. I know that. All it'll mean is that giant fucking heart inside of you has got room for even more love. Love you deserve. That's a beautiful thing, Jude.
More sobs escaped her as Judy's hand involuntarily went to her necklace, grasping it tightly. On her hollow, V was now openly crying as she continued.
I know. You're always gonna love me, Judy. And I'll always love you no matter where I am when you get this. So when this message is over, I want you to delete this. Not asking you to wipe every trace of me from your life, but this one, you need to erase. Please open your heart, Judy. Stay hopeful. Have faith in yourself. That's how you keep your promise to me.
V wiped the tears from her eyes as she straightened herself.
So, it's time for me to go now.
Judy breathed in sharply as she gripped her hollow tightly, realizing the recording was about to end.
Think I'm about to have a date with one pissed-off Aldecaldo. Not a chance in hell is Pan getting herself out of this one. Gonna all be worth it to see her running her bare ass all over the camp.
V laughed as she climbed aboard her bike. Taking a final look at Judy through the screen, V blew her a kiss.
Good luck, Jude. Live and love hard. Goodbye.
The image stopped for a moment, frozen on the wide grin which was on V's face before the screen went black. Judy dropped her hollow to her side as she began to cry, rocking back and forth as she clutched tightly at the crucifix which rested against her breast. A pair of warm hands rested on her shoulders. Judy looked up to see Kelly kneeling in front of her, her expression one of sympathy and concern. Her eyes widened as she struggled to find words. "Hey," Kelly whispered to her as she rubbed her shoulders. "You okay?" Judy nodded as she sniffed and wiped away her tears. "Yeah." Her voice creaked from her throat. Kelly's hands moved away from her shoulders, resting on her knees. "What can I do? How can I help you?" Judy's eyes drifted back to her hollow, which laid on the bench next to her. Picking it up, she moved her hand across the screen until she had V's message back on the screen. Her finger hovered over the delete button. She could feel her heart beating faster as her breathing quickened. With a final effort, she tapped her finger on the screen, erasing the message forever. Judy breathed in sharply as she slid her hollow back into her pocket. "Goodbye, V," she whispered. As Judy tried to steady her breathing, she became aware that Kelly had taken her hands off her. Bringing her gaze to Kelly's, she could see a mixture of fear and hesitation in her eyes. "I think we should maybe call it a night. You've had a long day, Jude, and—" Kelly stopped as Judy reached out, taking her hands into her own. For a long moment, Judy stared at their hands as their fingers entwined. She could hear Kelly's breathing quickening even as her own heart began to pound once more. Returning her eyes to Kelly, Judy released her grip of one of her hands. Reaching up, she grazed the back of her hand slowly against the smooth skin of Kelly's face. Kelly's eyes closed at the sensation as Judy traced the back of her hand along her jaw before turning to her other cheek, turning her hand inward to bring the warmth and smoothness of her skin against Kelly's. As Kelly opened her eyes, Judy slowly leaned forward, bringing her face closer to Kelly's. Closing her eyes, Judy stopped when their lips were nearly touching. In a low voice, she let herself go. "This is our day, Kelly." Pressing her lips against Kelly's, Judy was faintly aware of the incredible surge of excitement and adrenaline rushing through her body as Kelly's lips began to move against her own. Feeling Kelly's hand press firmly against her cheek, Judy mirrored the gesture as they kissed one another. Finally, after what seemed to be an eternity, Judy slowly pulled herself away. For a moment, the two women stared at each other silently, before they both broke out in laughter. "Guess that settles it," Kelly joked as she leaned in and kissed Judy once more before she rose from the ground and held her hand out. "Come on, let's get you home." Judy took her hand and stood. Seeing her shiver slightly, Judy slid off her jacket and draped it over Kelly's shoulders. Taking her hand into her own, they began to venture back the way they had come. As Judy walked with Kelly, her eyes wandered to the river, which fed from the nearby ocean. The evening had nearly turned to night, and the surface of the water had calmed to a gentle current as the wind had subsided.
"I know you'll always be there, V.
Feeling the thin chain of the necklace shifting delicately across the skin of her neck as she walked, Judy smiled. Her future was uncertain. She knew there would still be hard days ahead, times when she would feel like giving up or running away. But the release she felt in her heart was genuine, and as she glanced towards Kelly, Judy felt an exhilaration and hopefulness within her for what might lie ahead. And she also knew that no matter what happened, that she would be strong enough to weather whatever storms she might come across. Judy slowly lifted her free hand and slid it under the fabric of her shirt, resting against the starfish which was imprinted underneath. As her fingers moved across the surface of her skin, she raised her hand slightly to the newest tattoo she had added just a few months after V had died. Smiling to herself as she looked back out to the water, she gently traced the words which rested upon her navel just above the starfish. I promise.